Welcome back to Nocturnia. There are places in the world that feel like they are actively surrendering to ruin. Places where the air is thick with the sweet smell of decay. And the boundaries between civilization and wilderness are not just blurry, but have dissolved entirely. Florida is one such place. Tonight's story is about a man who looked upon this slow-motion apocalypse not with despair, but with a strange and holy purpose. He didn't mean to start a cult. He just wanted to fill the cracks in a broken world with something soft and green and patient. His name was Arthur, and his first prophet was a dumpy tree frog he named Cletus Litoria Caruli, a creature some might call ugly, with a body that sagged and spread like a melted scoop of pistachio ice cream. Arthur saw something else. Through the glass of its terrarium, Cletus stared back with eyes that seemed to understand that Arthur, too, was broken, and it seemed to approve. In a state already overrun by invasive Cuban tree frogs, pythons, and every manner of ecological refugee, Arthur had an idea. If Florida was going to be swallowed whole, perhaps it should be by something with a face as beautifully, peacefully ugly as Cletus. He didn't plan to breed them, not at first. But one frog became 2, then 20. Soon, his small apartment became a humid alien swamp. The croaking was constant, a guttural chorus that seemed to vibrate in the walls. Tadpoles swam in takeout containers lining the bathtub. Feeder crickets took over the cereal shelf. He was no longer a collector. He was a host, a substrate for a burgeoning, amphibious kingdom that was multiplying through him. He looked at the relentless decay of his surroundings, the invasive plants, the nicotine-addicted lizards, the sun-bleached strip malls, and he thought, if it's already broken, why not break it on purpose? Why not fill the cracks with something soft? His first release site was behind a wall, near a drainage canal, where the ground squished underfoot and the water smelled of rusted metal. He arrived with a 5-gallon bucket full of juvenile frogs and simply tilted it. They didn't flee. They crawled out slowly, like tiny green monks on a silent pilgrimage into a fallen world. Go, Arthur whispered to them, not as a command, but as a blessing. Go make Florida tolerable. He began to perform these rituals all over the county: parking lots, abandoned hotel fountains, golf course ponds, any place that felt forgotten, doomed, or quietly desperate. It was church, but for frogs. He didn't expect anyone to notice. But then he began to see them. One plastered to a red box machine like it was choosing a movie. Another sitting in a broken bird bath, baptizing mosquitoes. They weren't just surviving, they were presiding. They were present, like mold with intent. This spurred him on. His obsession consumed him. He stopped going to work. His apartment became a temple of humidity and chirping insects. But then something shifted. The new batch of frogs was different. One was born with too many toes. Another had a second, sealed mouth below its chin. One blinked sideways, a strange, unnatural flicker. The water in their containers began to smell different, thicker, like mildew and static electricity. His own body began to change, too. It started subtly, a congestion he couldn't shake. One morning, He woke up coughing and pulled a clump of translucent green film from the back of his throat. He blamed the mold in the apartment, but mold doesn't hum. He began wearing gloves, then a mask, but a persistent itch remained under his skin. One night, standing in the harsh light of his bathroom mirror, he saw it. The skin behind his ears was softening, taking on a greenish hue, like steamed spinach clinging to bone. His pupils were wrong wider, darker, as if they had been soaking in swamp water. The change didn't hurt. That's what truly terrified him. It didn't feel like violence. It felt like surrender. The transformation found its voice in public. While walking through a grocery store, a pressure built in his throat, a fullness behind his Adam's apple. Without meaning to, he let out a sound low, wet and guttural. A croak. It wasn't human, but it wasn't ugly either. It was a sound of power. The store lights above him flickered. He looked round, expecting alarm, but no one was staring. Not exactly. A woman near the yogurt section turned slowly. She blinked, as if waking from a long dream, and a slow, hungry smile spread across her face. He croaked again, involuntarily. She dropped her shopping basket. It kept happening. He would find himself in parks after dark, crouched near retention ponds, croaking into the still, humid air. He wasn't calling for help. He was just calling, and they came. From the suburban darkness, women would appear, drawn by a signal they couldn't understand but were powerless to resist. They arrived in work scrubs, in sundresses, some barefoot, their limbs loose and their eyes wide and shimmering in the moonlight. They would kneel on the grass, crouch by the water's edge, their mouths slack, watching him, and silent, expectant congregation. Something inside him was now broadcasting. A pheromone, perhaps. The croak, certainly. But it was more than that. He smelled of algae and rain, and he seemed to know the names of every wet ditch and forgotten canal in the county. He had set out to fill the cracks in a dying world with his creatures, but in the process, the world had filled him. The decay he sought to curate had found its patron saint. He had become a new kind of invasive species, one that promised not destruction, but a strange, green, and silent communion. It begs the question we are left with tonight. When the world is already ending, what is the difference between a monster and a messiah?